I would like to invite John Alley back to the podium, please, John, to introduce our speaker this evening.
You know, it's really my pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce Steve Madsen. I've known him for a good long time. And Steve went on, and you've already seen this book, but I'm going to put it up here again because it's such an important book. And they worked in the 80s, mostly, I guess, on this. And Steve by then had to find a real job, and he was teaching high school, which he had a long, good career in Granite School District as a history teacher and media specialist. But he was also trying to get a graduate degree, and that meant night classes. He would just tell me about this, and the University of Utah wasn't offering any, at least in history. And so he ended up going for his master's to BYU, but taking classes up here. And he studied under fellow Westerners Tom Alexander, Fred Gowans. I mean, think of that, the triumvirate of, and triumph too in a way, of Tom Alexander, Fred Gowans, and Greg Crampton as mentors. Steve brought his own talents to it, no doubt, but showed that he learned a lot from those three great historians, and ended up producing with Greg after a lot of work in the field. And I urge any of you who feel inclined to see even more of the images like Steve will show you tonight, some of the field work images especially. There are some of them online at history.utah.gov if you search for In Search of the Spanish Trail, and there's a whole larger collection. He also has a collection up at the U, but that launched him as, frankly, one of the top experts on the Spanish Trail, and he's been in demand in that role for a long time. I don't think there still is anything that provides as good a survey overview of the history of the Spanish Trail as this book still. And I'm glad Gibbs Smith still has it in print. It's worth picking up if you're at all interested in trails history. But the real important point is they were at the start of a movement to give the Spanish Trail its true due. It had kind of been ignored up until then. And so people like the National Park Service and OCTA, the Old Spanish Trail Association, have for some time now been relying on the direct knowledge of Steve Madsen as a critical expert on that trail as it's become better known, and it's been recognized as a significant item in American history that has distinctive elements to it. But that isn't all Steve did. He published a very good book on Union, as most of us know it as Fort Union, a history of Union. Well, he was just talking to me as well about his involvement in the memorial grove a while back for the 4 original African Americans who came to Utah. Steve had written probably one of the first, if not the first, extensive essays on Green Flake for his book in Union. So he was there participating in that and sharing his work with the family. But I'm particularly proud myself to have played a very small part in getting this excellent book published, which was Steve's work. It's called Exploring Desert Stone, John N. McComb's 1859 Expedition to the Canyonlands of the Colorado. And that's on the cover there, and there are color images inside. That's one of John S. Newberry's, one of America's great 19th century scientists, geologists and paleontologists especially. One of his drawings of Lower Indian Creek. If you guys know where Indian Creek is, of course, it drains right down in Canyonlands National Park. And this was the first expedition, and one of the last of the great topographical engineer expeditions, but it was the first expedition to reach the area of Canyonlands National Park. In fact, it was motivated by an attempt to reach the confluence of the Green and Colorado rivers. But it's a beautiful book Steve did, and it includes a folded map by Egglofstein. Did I get that right? Egglofstein, yes. Who was a great early American cartographer who worked with a number of the expeditions. So I think Steve has been a good, solid member of this organization for longer than I have, and I think you'll get one of his finest contributions tonight, and just seeing some of the work he did, and with Greg Crampton in their research on the history of the Spanish Trail.
Well, thank you, John. That's a generous introduction. I appreciate that very much. John is our resident expert on the topic of Death Valley 49ers. And I'll touch on that subject lightly in my presentation, but you need to talk to John for more details. I'd also like to acknowledge Catherine Smith for her work in facilitating the publication of the book by Crampton and I, In Search of the Spanish Trail. And also Kay Threlkeld, who's also a member here, who made digital copies of the Crampton Madsen field maps, which in turn were donated to the Utah State Historical Society. And I'd like to say, I hope you weren't expecting an Old Spanish Trail on steroids presentation, because you're going to get a Spanish Trail light presentation similar to the beverages you've been drinking this evening. My wife, every time I speak to the Westerners, she reminds me, and I'm going to quote her, "Don't be concerned about the outcome of your presentation. You've already accomplished what's most important. You got the garbage out to the curb in time for pickup." I mean, there's sound advice right there from a wise woman. Well, folks, we'll start here with this slide. Chances are you won't find Spanish doubloons, buried treasure, or lost gold or silver mines along the Old Spanish Trail. Sorry. We were out there looking for 18 years, Crampton and me. But you'll discover other treasures. In addition to viewing firsthand the vanishing remains of the trail itself, you'll likely encounter rich cultural and geographical diversity, including national parks, prehistoric ruins, mining and railroad towns, historic springs, as well as American Indian communities and Spanish settlements. Some of the most visually striking sections of the Old Spanish Trail are to be found in southern Utah and northwestern Arizona, as well as southeastern Nevada, where images of trail riders were carved on walls of desert sandstone by southern Paiutes. Now I'm going to focus today on the section from Parowan Valley to Mormon Mesa, and if time permits, I'll show images of other sections of the trail. A word of caution. Desert travel is still hazardous in many areas along the old trail. Dry washes of bottomless sand become rivers of quicksand after a heavy rain. Water is scarce in many places, as it was in the Spanish Trail days. Sharp rocks can pierce an oil pan or a 6-ply tire. Many back roads are unmarked. Some don't appear on any map, including GPS. The desert can be a dangerous place. Search and rescue folks tell us we need personal locator beacons when we travel to remote locations. The Old Spanish Trail, folks, is a federally recognized National Historic Trail created on December 4th, 2002. It is administered by the National Park Service and the Bureau of Land Management, and it has its own logo. The distance from Santa Fe to Los Angeles over the main route was 1,100 plus miles. It crossed the present-day states of New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California. The main reason for travel on the Old Spanish Trail was to carry raw wool and locally woven New Mexican textiles to Southern California to be exchanged for horses and pack mules. Pack animals were in big demand on the Santa Fe Trail and among the western tribes and frontier trappers. Herds of up to 2,000 animals or more were driven over the trail. Trade caravans up to a mile in length with some 200 men usually left late in the summer or early in the fall and returned in the spring of the following year. It took trail riders 2.5 months to make the journey in each direction. Trading caravans frequently enslaved Southern Paiutes and other indigenous people along the Old Spanish Trail route, a dark spot on the history of the trail. Early trading parties and overland expeditions laid the groundwork for the Old Spanish Trail. They included the Rivera expedition of 1765, the Garces expedition of 1776, the Dominguez Escalante expedition of 1776, and the Jedediah Smith expeditions of the 1820s. Old Spanish Trail methodology included intensive library and archival research to document the route. We combed the holdings of several institutions to find records related to the trail route. Field work was a vital part of the detective work. Our goal was to locate and map the trail in detail for the first time. We're talking about the main route. Our reasons for researching the Old Spanish Trail were critical due to the rapid intrusion that threatened to destroy the trail. And ultimately, we wanted to see it gain national historic status to properly preserve it. Before going into the field, we did a tremendous amount of homework. On topographic maps, we laid down the most probable route and then went into the field to check our preliminary findings. So important things here. Before going out in the field, you had to have your topographic maps. And most of our topographic maps, sadly, were 15-minute maps, not the 7.5-minute variety that now covers the 48 states. But at least we had these, and these were most of the maps we did have were the 15-minute variety. We also had an old-fashioned map wheel to measure the distances along the trail. Not the digital kind you folks are used to. Okay? We were old school. In fact, we were so old school, Crampton thought it would be wise to wear these. And so we went out to the university surplus store and we each got ourselves a pith helmet to go out and explore the Old Spanish Trail. So for the first few years, these are the hats we wore out on the trail. That's a real keepsake. Now, we want to check our preliminary findings. So we went out into Utah's Castle Valley, where government surveyors, notably Augustus D. Farron, had very carefully charted Gunnison's Road on their township plats, further identified in their notes as the Old Spanish Trail. Early in our investigations, we drove to Castle Valley, parked alongside Utah Highway 10 on Walker Flat, and walked out through sagebrush and stunted vegetation to find the Old Spanish Trail running in the exact location where we had penciled it on the map. Those who assisted us in the field, you'll recognize some of these. See some of them?
Yeah.
Who's on the left side there, folks? Bud Rusho. He helped us out there along with Don Sakala. Henry Webb, professor at the University of Utah. There he is, sitting on an arch overlooking Pack Saddle Gulch. Herb Butt of Paiute Spring. John Jorgensen, of Castledale. Gibbs Smith, Catherine, you'll recognize him, on the far right. S. Alva Matheson of Cedar City. John W. Rockwell, Adrian Madsen, my wife, Maria Crampton, Greg's wife, and Cecil Thompson of Moab. This is a map of our book showing the Old Spanish Trail from Parowan Valley to Mountain Meadows. The bold line running through the map represents the Old Spanish Trail. And you can see this section starts up in the Sevier River Valley and it pierces through the Markagoon Plateau, Hurricane Cliffs, over into Parowan Valley and down, swinging around Antelope Range and then on into Mountain Meadows. We begin our journey over the Old Spanish Trail in southern Utah's Parawan Valley, which served as a base for Ute Indians led by Wakara, who exacted tribute from trading parties on the trail. Passing through the valley in 1844, John C. Fremont observed the Ute band and wrote about the local geography. In particular, he noted that in the upper end of the valley, Little Salt Lake lies nearly opposite a gap in the chain of mountains through which the Spanish Trail passes. In the spring of 1844, John C. Fremont entered Utah from the south along the Old Spanish Trail. The map of his expedition shows where he left the trail near the Little Salt Lake and headed north toward Utah Valley. And you can see the Spanish Trail veering off to the right. Here are the ruins of Fort Johnson, settled in the 1850s at the site of historic St. Joseph Springs, near present-day Enoch, Utah. Enoch residents today pay tribute to the Old Spanish Trail in various ways. Iron Springs Camp in Cedar Valley. The late S. Alva Matheson of Cedar City found Spanish Trail artifacts, including an amulet at this site. In Cedar Valley, the Spanish Trail crosses the Dominguez Escalante Trail at right angles. The only spot where the two trails touch in Utah. I want to emphasize that. They're two separate trails. Beyond Cedar Valley, the trail enters the southern plain of the Escalante Desert, labeled in 1776 Our Lady of Light by the two Franciscan fathers. The trail proceeds westward around the northern base of the lightly forested Antelope Range. On the mountain's north side, Antelope Spring issues from the ground, today supplying water for livestock. Mormon Battalion Captain Jefferson Hunt led a wagon train of Gold Rush immigrants known as the San Joaquin Company, consisting of 107 wagons, about 400 men and some women and children, on the southern route to California via the Old Spanish Trail. On their journey south, they lost a week of travel time when Captain Hunt and others tried to avoid the Black Mountains and searched for an alternate route along the Beaver River and on into Escalante Desert. It became a dead end. The group lost confidence in Captain Hunt and began passing around a sketch map. Unfortunately, we don't have a copy of that today, of a shortcut route drawn by mountain man Barney Ward. They also consulted John C. Fremont's more recent map of the region, which depicted a fictitious mountain range running east and west. At the base of that range, the 49ers hoped to find reliable water sources as they moved on toward California. The wooden rodometer on Addison Pratt's wagon measured the southern route and provided necessary data for the 1851 Mormon Way Bill, a guidebook to the California gold mines. This is the portion of John C. Fremont's 1848 map showing the unexplored, non-existent east-west mountain range. The 49ers hoped to cut across the Mojave Desert to the San Joaquin Valley via Walker's Pass, named for Joseph R. Walker, a mountain pass in the southern Sierra Nevada. In November 1849, on the trail east of today's Enterprise, Utah, the majority of San Joaquin Company 49ers decided to part ways. and ventured from the old Spanish Trail. 100 wagons and some 64 packers, lured by gold and cutoff fever, separated from the company to follow the shortcut. Among the packers were George Q. Cannon, Charles C. Rich, James Flake, and Henry Bigler, who carved his initials in sandstone at the head of Beaver Dam Wash. At Mount Misery, today's Pine Park, and you can kind of see why it would be called Mount Misery to these folks, famous for its hoodoos formed by compressed volcanic ash about 20 miles west of Enterprise, Utah. Most of the 49ers turned back to the old Spanish Trail. They had enough of this. They're going back to the safe trail, the old Spanish Trail. But some of the party abandoned their wagons and pushed on following the packers toward Death Valley. In addition, about 100 men, women, and children and 26 wagons found a way around the maze west of Beaver Dam Wash. Wandering westward through the desert, several of them stumbled into Death Valley, where they met misfortune and gave the valley its name. William Lewis Manley and other 49ers, including Harry Wade and family, were among those who attempted a shortcut to the goldfields by way of Death Valley. Harry Wade and William Lewis Manley were part of the Bennett Arcan group, which headed south on entering the Death Valley. The Jayhawkers, another huge group, and others headed north out of the valley. Manley returned and saved 2 wagons of immigrants and later wrote the book Death Valley in '49. Here's Fremont's 1845 map showing the old Spanish Trail through Vegas de Santa Clara, or Mountain Meadows, the Mountain Meadows area. Notice the Santa Clara River at the base of the map. Beyond the fateful parting of the ways by the 49ers, the old Spanish Trail moves up Holt Canyon, which opens out into grassy mountain meadows, known in the trail days as Vegas de Santa Clara. The tranquil setting of mountain meadows conceals the tragedy that befell overland travelers here in the post-trail period. For multiple reasons, in the early part of September 1857, some Latter-day Saint militiamen massacred a California-bound company of about 120 Arkansas immigrants. The attackers spared only 18 children. Utah Westerners should definitely look for Rick Turley and Barbara Brown's upcoming publication, Vengeance is Mine, a sequel to Massacre at Mountain Meadows. From the massacre site at Mountain Meadows on the old Spanish Trail, the trail follows down the branches of the Santa Clara River through the area of Central, Vail, and Gunlock, an offshoot, pun intended, of the Santa Clara settlement farther downstream. Here's a map of the Virgin River drainage showing the old Spanish Trail route from the headwaters of the Santa Clara River to Mormon Mesa and beyond. And you can see the trail again is in the bold line running through the map. And it starts up there near Central, goes past Vail and the volcano there, you're probably familiar with, down into the area, I gotta focus my, by Gunlock, and then to Shem, and then it veers from the river at Shem, and then goes up over the Beaver Dam Mountains, and then down Utah Hill towards Beaver Dam Wash. It enters the Virgin River Valley right there, and it actually dips into the Virgin River just a few miles beyond Littlefield, Arizona, and then follows down that course about 18 miles to the mouth of Halfway Wash. Here's a lunch stop along the trail in Gunlock. We ate tailgate lunches generally in picturesque locations. The standard fare included corn chips and a savory hot sauce, aptly named El Grego for Craig Crampton. The trail leaves the Santa Clara River at a point on the present-day Chivwitz Paiute Indian Reservation where the stream swings to the east. 1 mile beyond the river, the trail reaches Camp Spring. At Camp Spring, today's trail explorers will find the names of several mid-19th century travelers chiseled on the register rocks near the waterhole. Beyond this camping spot, the trail continues on over the Beaver Dam Mountains. The Spanish Trail ascends the steep slopes of the Beaver Dam Mountains following the line of US Highway 91. After crossing the summit at Castle Rock, the trail rolls down a gentle grade through a forest of Joshua trees that mark the eastern limits of the Mojave Desert. Thinly shaded by Joshuas and surrounded by prickly pear and cholla cacti, creosote bush, and Spanish bayonets or stout stem yuccas, the trail moves on to the Arizona border to complete its passage through Utah. 7 miles beyond the Utah border, the Spanish Trail crosses Beaver Dam Wash, an intermittent stream that flows into the Virgin River, a branch of the Colorado. The trail crosses the stream bed 1/2 mile above its mouth. It pushes on through northwestern Arizona to reach the Virgin River some 3 miles beyond present-day Littlefield. And on his map of, speaking of the Virgin River, on his map of the expedition, John C. Fremont recorded the name Rio Virgen. It is now considered America's last free-flowing, one of America's last free-flowing rivers. Today, modern highways parallel or cover sections of the Spanish Trail. One early road was the Arrowhead Trail. The idea of the Arrowhead Trail was proposed by businessmen in Las Vegas to encourage automobile tourism between Los Angeles and Salt Lake City. First driven in 1915, the Arrowhead Trail followed the corridor of the old Spanish Trail in some places and diverged from it in others. The original route ran through St. Thomas, later inundated by Lake Mead. The road was replaced in 1926 by US Highway 91 and subsequently by I-15. With government funding, the old US Highway 91 was built in the 1920s along the corridor of the Arrowhead Trail. And you can see it from the Shivwitz Reservation over towards Mesquite. Here's a map of old US Highway 91 from Beaver Dam Wash to Bunkerville. I love this ad from the 1927 book that pictures the route. Here above the big bend of the Virgin River, the old Spanish Trail descends to the riverbed. Note C. Gregory Crampton's hand-drawn arrows on the photo to show the route down to the river. When shod animals crossed such areas as this, thin layers of iron rubbed off when they slipped on the cobbles. As the slip marks oxidized, they appeared as rust-colored streaks on the light-colored rocks. We found several rust stains on the cobbles and rounded boulders on the path descending to the river. These stained rocks clearly marked the trail route. The trail followed the Virgin River channel some 18 miles, crossing and recrossing the river at least 10 times. Here's Britton and Ray's 1857 map of California and its gold region, showing the old Spanish Trail crossing Mormon Mesa to reach the Vegas Springs. Today, I-15 crosses Mormon Mesa on its way to Las Vegas, and in many rural areas, I-15 was built on top of the former US Highway 91. Signs that mark the trail for today's travelers can be found in prominent locations in southern Nevada's Virgin Valley area. Our research materials, field notes, and field maps have been deposited in special collections at the University of Utah, where today they are open to use by serious investigators. I might add that in 2003, I donated more than 200 topographic maps that delineate the old Spanish Trail route. Historian Roy D.T. marked the entire route on the maps using photocopies of the Crampton-Madsen maps at the University of Utah. Kay Threlkeld of the Salt Lake office of the National Park Service subsequently made digital copies of the Spanish Trail maps and burned them on CDs. These maps and CDs are now in the collections of the Utah State Historical Society. We flew over Mormon Mesa and other areas along the trail in southern Nevada to get another perspective of the trail stretching from the Virgin River to the Muddy. Prior to our aerial reconnaissance, we had investigated the Mesa Rim and the trail itself, but we needed to see it in its broader context. Also, trail marks visible from the air were sometimes hard to see on the ground. Using light aircraft at elevations of 500 to 1,000 feet proved helpful in spotting sections of the trail. This is an aerial view of Virgin Hill on the east side of Mormon Mesa, a nearly flat, bone-dry tableland shaped like an arrowhead. About 17 miles downstream from Mesquite, at the eastern base of Mormon Mesa, the Old Spanish Trail leaves the Virgin River. It climbs the sandy bed of Halfway Wash 2 miles to reach the steep slope of Virgin Hill. And here's my photo of Virgin Hill as the trail ascends to the top of the mesa. At this point, the trail rises approximately 360 feet in less than half a mile, a grade of over 13%. Wagon-borne emigrants found the uphill scramble strenuous. To ascend the lower bench of the hill, David W. Cheeseman in 1850 found it necessary to triple the oxen teams. To reach the second bench or top of the hill, Cheeseman drove the animals to the rim, then drew the wagons up by chaining them to yoked oxen. Lieutenant Sylvester Mowry in 1855 says, "The hill is one of the worst I ever saw. 10 mules were used on each of the wagons, and my small team was 2.5 hours getting onto the plateau." Here's the lower section of the Old Spanish Trail on Virgin Hill, where we visited it around Thanksgiving time. You can see me with the coat on. Here's the wagon road on the east side of Mormon Mesa, which is 2 miles south of the Old Spanish Trail. By 1866, ardent photographer William H. Jackson passed this way. When he did so, a very steep wagon road had been built from the mouth of the wash to the top of the mesa. In this wild country, the red barrel cactus, threatened by human impact, clings precariously to the broken and barren mesa rim. In former times, desperate, sun-parched travelers, swinging machetes, slaked their thirst by cutting through the plant's red, bristling exterior and extracting its green, juicy pulp. And I might add, while we were out there, Crampton and I had to just pick a few of the seeds from the tops of these plants, and they're now in an envelope deposited at the State Historical Society in our collection. Here's C. Gregory Crampton on Mormon Mesa. You can see the Virgin Range in the background. And doesn't he look chipper there? Before we went out, he said, "Steve, we got to go find a thrift store and we got to dress pretty lightly if we're going to go out here in the middle of August in this unbearable heat and try to find the trail." Well, I want to just point out that the northern part, where you're going to visit on this field trip next month, the northern part of Gold Butte National Monument and Whitney Pocket's petroglyph panels are near the base of the Virgin Range, which you'll be visiting. From the east rim of Mormon Mesa, the route slowly pushes on some 11 miles across open desert terrain studded with sharp rocks to its western rim. It drops rapidly from the mesa's edge north of today's I-15 near Glendale, Nevada, to reach the Muddy River, a branch of the Colorado in the Moapa Valley northeast of Las Vegas. And you can see Crampton on the trail there. In the Moapa Valley, 2 miles west of Glendale, the Spanish Trail crosses the Muddy River to the mouth of California Wash. California Wash, they now had another 50-mile plus jornada to move towards Las Vegas from that point. It was just a dry dry stretch. Anyway, crosses the muddy river to reach the mouth of California Wash. Orville Pratt and party arrived here on October 10th, 1848, and camped on the riverbank. He stated, "We found a large body of Indians, Paiutes. From them we bought some green corn and beans, and what a meal we made." This was home to the Mowapat band of Southern Paiutes, and the river crossing came to be known as the Old California Crossing. For your information, John Alley over there is a recognized authority on the history of that tribe. We found these petroglyphs in the upper Moapa Valley, not far from the famous pack route in southern Nevada. Crampton ignored a large no trespassing sign, which was common for him to do. A closed gate, again, another common thing, and a large barking dog. He drove past every obstacle, finally reaching a ranch house where we found the owner and settled the dog, who settled the dog and gave us permission to explore the carvings. Distinct figures of trail riders on horseback and New Mexican traders are etched in a desert varnish on historic petroglyph panels. These spectacular images illustrate a thrilling episode in our nation's history. May you too make valuable trail discoveries and enjoy great adventures as you explore the Spanish Trail. Now, this is where I typically would end the slideshow, but I want to show you additional photographs from other sections of the old Spanish Trail. Okay, running in a west to east orientation. This is the Spanish Trail marker in Los Angeles Plaza, where the end of the trail is. Mission San Gabriel, where it was basically the last outfitting spot on the trail as they moved eastward. Here's the old Spanish Trail above Cajon Pass, and you can see the San Bernardino Mountains. Excuse me, I'm looking at my computer. You can see the San Bernardino Mountains off in the distance. Here I am sampling the water at Bitter Spring on the Fort Irwin military base, which is, they practice combat training there, and scary place. Anyway, we managed to get inside. Here's Salt Spring at the base of Salt Spring Hills. This was a fabulous spot for trade caravans to camp. Here we find Emigrant Pass, today with a Spanish Trail marker in the California desert. The Mormon Fort or Las Vegas Ranch on the old Spanish Trail. It's the oldest building in Las Vegas. The trail east of Nellis Air Force Base. It's a beautiful section of trail. Here's Crampton navigating rough terrain to get to the area close to the trail. Now we skip over several slides covering what we've already discussed in this presentation to reach Butch Cassidy's childhood cabin along the trail near Circleville. Here we find cattle grazing along the trail on the bank of the Sevier. Crampton had to take photographs of the old Spanish Trail mural in downtown Salina. Here's Crampton above a pictograph, at a pictograph I should say, above I-70. This is what the Elk Mountain Mission people saw in 1855 as they were heading to Moab. Here I am at that inscription, the inscription of one of those members. You can see the date, 1855, I am the human. Here we found a wild burro near the trail overlook on Cedar Mountain. Now folks, for us it was a sign. We had to explore the Spanish Trail. I mean, this is June of '76. We had to get out there and make this serious study. These animals, folks, carried the wood for the trade caravans. And we couldn't help thinking, I should say, that this must have been a descendant of one of those. Here we found wild horses on the trail in the San Rafael. Maybe descendants. Here's Crampton on the trail at Buckhorn Flat. Here I am at Furniture Draw. You can clearly see the trail. Here is Crampton at Big Holes, a watering spot on the old Spanish Trail. And I'll tell you, plenty of water there. We built a white man's fire in the San Rafael as we camped on various occasions to explore the trail in greater detail. Here's the desert west of Green River after a wet season. You can see the San Rafael Reef in the distance. Here's Crampton surveying the route into Trail Spring. Here he is at the Green River water wheel above the historic ford. Here's the Spanish Trail crossing of Green River. And that took us forever to spot. We had to use free of John Wesley Powell's journals and other men on his expeditions and several other sources to pinpoint this exact location of where the Spanish Trail crosses the Green. Here I am at the Antoine Robideau inscription in Westwater Canyon, east of the Spanish Trail. That's just north, or just beyond, I should say, the north branch of the Spanish Trail. Crampton's taking a picture of me as I'm taking a picture of the inscription. Here's a close-up of that inscription. And I'm going to try my best to interpret it. Antoine Robideau passed this way the 13th of November, 1837 to establish a trading house on the river White or Uinta. Upper Courthouse Spring in Moab Canyon. Here's the river crossing on the Colorado near the portal. Here we find the Elk Mountain Mission Fort site near Moab. And it was that freighting pioneer that from Moab that took us out to this site and showed us the exact spot where the Elk Mountain Mission built their fort. And this was Cecil Thompson of Moab. Here's the trail ascending Blue Hill south of Moab. That's a beautiful section of it. You can see an airstream up on the highway. I love airstreams. Here's Outlaw Tom McCarty's inscription at the base of St. Louis Rock, now a tourist trap known as Hole in the Rock. Here's Crampton sampling the water at the mouth of Hook and Ladder Gulch. Here is Casa Colorado Rock on the trail. Here are the tanks at the base of Casa Colorado. My wife is pretending to be Hispanic here. Crampton on an arm of the Casa Colorado, way out there. I'm with Herb Butt at Ucolo Poroff, just south of Paiute Spring, east of Monticello. Here's the trail and wagon road at the Utah-Colorado border. That wagon road was known as the Delores Monticello Road in the 1800s. And you could see that a small section of the old Spanish Trail was not covered by that wagon road there on the right side. Here's the Spanish Trail above the Animas River south of Durango, Greg Thompson's stomping grounds. Here's the Southern Ute Indian Reservation at Ignacio. This was the home of the former U.S. Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell, who introduced the legislation to make the Spanish Trail a National Historic Trail. Here we find archaeology at an ancient Pueblo site along the trail, and then famous Dr. Joe Ben Wheat directing the work. Here's Yellow Jacket along the trail. Here's the Escalante Ruin near Delores. This was examined by Father Escalante in August of 1776, and you can see in the distance, you can see the craggy outline of Mesa Verde. Here's along the trail at La Plata Valley. Here's permission given to Crampton and me to explore the Jicarilla lands. The permission was given by the president of the tribe. Here we find one of those rare instances where the Old Spanish Trail and the Dominguez Escalante Trail are the same trail in northern New Mexico. Here's Echo Amphitheater along the trail. Rock formations that are quite fabulous along the trail. The ruins of Santa Rosa de Lima, where Dominguez Escalante held Mass in July of 1776. The Chama River Valley, a village of Abacu, New Mexico. And we swear we saw Georgia O'Keeffe walking through that village on one of our stops there. Taos Pueblo on the trail's north branch. San Juan Pueblo on the upper Rio Grande. Tesuque Pueblo on the trail's main route. And the end of the trail at the Palace of the Governors, the oldest public building in the United States of America. The Palace of the Governors. And here I am finally pinpointing the exact route of the Old Spanish Trail for the National Park Service and the BLM in Santa Fe, New Mexico in 2013. Thank you.
Steve, would you entertain questions?
I'm not sure. Some of you people are more astute than I am.
I doubt that.
Sure. Eddie? Yeah, Craig.
I was just wondering, did the trail sometimes start in Abacu and sometimes start in Santa Fe?
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, Abacu is 50 miles north of Santa Fe, and it was basically inhabited by Genesaros, or Hispanicized Native Americans, and it was another outfitting post just before they launched off into the wilderness. Any other questions? Yes.
So this shows several routes, main route.
Oh, yes.
Routes for all of those?
No, we did not. We decided that the main route was the one we wanted to concentrate on. The North Branch swung over through Taos and Gunnison and through the San Luis Valley, Cochitopa Pass, and so on. And then it merged with our main route near Green River, Utah. The Armijo route was only used maybe once or twice. Crampton had already seen that on his expeditions in the Glen Canyon region. He had been there at the Crossing of the Fathers and explored the Armijo route and the steps in the sandstone years and years before we launched into this study. I want to say Crampton, in my estimation, was the greatest field historian I have ever known. I mean, he did an awesome amount of work in the Glen Canyon area, and before I launched into this study with him, he was with Bud Ruscho exploring the Dominguez Escalante Trail for the Four Corners Regional Commission. He did so many things like that, but I don't know of any other person that was better adept at field work than Greg Crampton. The greatest. I was honored to be part of that team. Yes.
So the choice of route, was that circumstance based on weather or grasses?
Yes. The main route was used most prominently. In fact, it swung north to avoid hostile Indians in Arizona, as well as the deep river canyons down there. The Mojave Road, it swung down to Needles area, where we had Native Americans dwelling in that area, the Mojave Indians, and then it pushed on westward to meet up with the main route near, Cajon Pass area. Yes.
Steve, just in a big picture way, you look at these trails these days with our contemporary sensibilities, we think it just looks like it's wandering all over the map. You don't realize you're following topography and you're following water. could you describe just, how does the water and the landscape line up? I mean, is it always water that creates those circuitous routes?
It's a very extremely important part of it. But also, you know, the terrain dictated the route much of the time. There's some pretty rough terrain out there, and there's only very few ways to get around that. And you're not going to go up over a steep mountain to get to where you want to go. So they had to go around and find these routes that have been carved out, originally, much of it by Native Americans, and later by these other explorers, like the Spanish explorers. But, you know, remember, these Spanish explorers never met their objective. Dominguez and Escalante never made it to California. Garces never made it to New Mexico. Folks, this Spanish Trail was the first ever to meet, to, you know, get those two major areas connected. Southern California and Northern Arizona, or Northern New Mexico. Yeah, Steve.
So, when do you think, or who do you think, started using the halfway to wash route?
I think it was probably as early as Porter Rockwell, or maybe even earlier, because there were some people. The workman Rowland party moved across that area in the 1830s.
Why is it called halfway wash?
No idea. Yes, Charles.
So, on our last field trip, the Santa Fe Trail, we talked about over to Santa Fe and then also a different trail on the way back. Was that because of climate? How much of that trail was different going all the way?
Okay, so you're saying that they followed a different route going back?
There was two trails in certain areas, one going one direction and one different. And then, you know, the markers that are the silhouettes, they're saying that kind of shows the direction of the trail.
You know, I'm not so sure about markers. You know, in the 1950s, William Palmer started putting up markers in prominent locations near the trail, in places like cities and parks and so on. And so they're not really near exactly on the trail itself, a lot of these markers.
So have you heard about the different trail going one way or another?
No, not really. You know, we had to get this. The National Park Service is pretty sticklish about getting this made into a National Historic Trail. It had to go through a rigorous kind of, what would you call it, study and plan and so on. And Congress had to pass the legislation, both houses of Congress. The president had to sign the legislation in 2002. So it was a big deal. It had to be significant, this trail, in order to become a National Historic Trail. It wasn't one of those fly-by-night, legendary, buried treasures and lost gold mines kind of thing. Sorry to burst your bubbles.
Mark?
Yes.
When we stopped several years ago for our field trip, when we stopped at the museum in Green River,
Yes.
and where the old bridge is, how far north was the true crossing?
The crossing is about 2.5 miles north of that site. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, Joe.
Was Bukhara a big-time rustler with hundreds and hundreds of horses from California along the Spanish Trail and back toward Santa Fe or wherever he sold them?
Yeah, he traded with trappers, sold them to trappers, sold them probably in Santa Fe because he could make a fortune taking them there, because then they could be sent up over the Santa Fe Trail to those overland trails heading westward. Steve.
Well, you probably looked at a lot of town plaques and maps. And
Yes.
I know one right outside of the Mesquite where the old Spanish Trail was marked and it's not there. Did you run into a lot of local interpretations that you knew?
we had to go with the oldest information. The closer you get to the date of the trail, we were focusing on the 1840s. As close as you can get to that, the better. Later interpretations, a little skeptical. Yes, Brad.
Steve, do you think since we're coming up to the 250th anniversary of our nation, that this would be an appropriate time to maybe mark out better or do something as far as more public history related to this trail and perhaps maybe this Escalante as well?
Definitely. You know, I feel like it's overlooked. Southern Utah is overlooked. The trails south of here, who cares? We're all interested in this north section of Utah. That's what I feel. I feel like they're really overlooked and they really need some more press. And you know, these good people of Nevada, Las Vegas, putting up those concrete pylons in 1964 across their state and into California was a remarkable thing to show where the trail ran through their territory. And we need to do something similar, not maybe as costly, but something similar to give the trail more press.
An
Yeah.
interstate enterprise is what I think we...
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yes, Pat?
Maybe you ought to talk to Aaron Marr and the people in Santa Fe. They did a great job for our trail. The young intern girls there produced a sign plan telling us where they thought the signs should be placed at strategic places, and then they produced the signs. We got backing from local governments for some of the hardware and things, and then our group provided the manpower. But that might be a route to getting some more information out there.
Well, I appreciate that. You know, Aaron, I've known him since 2009 when I met with him and the National Park Service in Phoenix to show him where the trail ran back then. And I provided him with all kinds of information subsequent to that workshop with him. I think that the best route is through the Old Spanish Trail Association. The Congress gives them money annually to further the cause of the trail. So that's one way. Anybody else?
One more question?
Is Madsen getting money from the government to put up the burrows? Because they're spraying up all
You're talking about
the silhouette.
this? Oh, I don't think so. He's a remarkable guy. He's the son of S. Alva, and yeah, I've known him for years, and I think those are marvelous ways to show, or at least, pay tribute to the trail.
There's more coming out of Parawan now. There's maybe 5 sets of them. Some of them going out towards Antelope Springs, down Utah Hill, up to Fish Lake.
Yeah.
That's great. That's great.
Steve,
I
I have
applaud
one
it.
last question.
I applaud it.
How long was the project that you worked with C. Gregory Crampton?
The project with C. Gregory Crampton was 18 years long. And had we known when we saw that wild burrow that it would take that long, we never would have proceeded. But, we could do it, consistently. He was writing other books. I was getting my master's degree. I wrote another book, and so on. We just didn't have the time to consistently be out on the trail, but during our vacation times and holidays, boy, we made it a point to be out there.
You both had a few classes to teach as well.
Yes, I was teaching high school. Well, thank you, folks.